Well, hello and welcome, Electus Society members. Today is a special webinar and training called How to Protect Yourself and Your Family When Buying or Leasing a Car with me doing most of the presentation and training, but we also have a guest speaker, William Ramos. He's the founder of Marrero Auto Group. I consider him a car expert and a car advocate. And so he's going to be also here to be able to answer any of the questions that you might have. And he's going to be available for all of the Electus Society members to help save you money. So first of all, let's talk about what we're going to be learning in this training today. It's going to be a networking opportunity. I know that we don't have as many participants as usual just because we had a lot of students communicate that they were just busy, but we'll definitely watch the recording. So special shout out to those students who reached out to me, and thank you for responding and letting me know that you're going to watch that as soon as you have a chance after you pass your exams or whatever you guys got class going on. So we do have a couple of people participating. I'm also going to be reviewing what I learned from a book, How to Buy a Car for Dummies, because remember, this special webinar is part of a monthly series called the Leadership Library, where I really like to do a deep dive into some kind of book, either about leadership or success. And so when I was thinking, should I do a topic about how to buy a car or lease a car? And I thought about it and I really said to myself, you know what? There are a lot of students out there and they are being taken advantage of, when it comes to actually buying a car, leasing a car. And so this whole training is really about giving you the behind the scenes look about buying and leasing a car, kind of like in Wizard of Oz. We're going to show you what's behind the curtain. And to me, it has to do with the issues of integrity and transparency. And so if I can help empower all the Electus Society's members to help them make smarter decisions, to help save money, then to me, it was a worthwhile topic for us to tackle. So I'm going to share my own family's experience when we had to buy a new car or lease a new car. And then, of course, we have William Ramos on the line, who's the car advocate and car expert. He comes from 3 generations of his family has been or have been in the car business. And he himself has been in the car business for over 20 years, serving as a director of the service department, sales department at different dealerships. So he actually knows inside knowledge of how these things work. And so I really asked him, I said, hey, William, can you do a presentation and train all my Electus Society members all about how they can, save money or protect themselves? He's like, Tim, you do the training. You're the trainer. I'll just answer the questions. I'm like, okay, fine. I'll take all the knowledge that you share with me, digest it, and share it with the members. So I basically boiled down his ideas and suggestion in terms of 7 tips. So I'm going to share with all of you now. But before we go further, remember these leadership library sessions are all about networking, right? It's an opportunity for you to actually meet different members of Electus Society. And so I like to just ask you this question. What strange or interesting experience have you or someone you've known had buying or leasing a car? So if it was going to be, I'll model the way. For example, again, Tim Duffy, I went to Queens College and that's in New York. I'm a level 2 member because I've done all the type of different trainings. So the strangest experience was my wife. She was in college and wanted to buy a car. It was like some Hyundai Elantra car, and it was just around her budget. So she contacted a person, went out to go visit that person, and then that person was so sketchy. Right when she arrived, she's like, okay, let me look at the car. I may be interested in buying the car. And he's like, well, I have somebody else who's coming and they said that they're going to offer me more money. So if you want this car, you're going to have to pay more. Are you still interested? And she's like, yeah, but you told me this price. And so again, it was this kind of, my girlfriend at the time, now wife, had just had terrible taste in her mouth about the whole buying car experience. And so I was able to share with her some different tips that you're going to learn in this training. So who'd like to go next? Can I ask Maheen? I know that you're on a bus and maybe you might have some background. Do you have a strange or interesting experience where you or someone you know had buying or leasing a car? It's okay if you haven't. You could always say no, pass. Maheen, are you there?
Yes, I am. I would say like I don't drive No.
Well, you're like, I ride the bus. I don't have a car, right? So,
Yeah.
all
No.
right. So don't
But
worry.
yeah, yeah.
Go
So
ahead. What were
like
you going to say?
I was saying like I don't know like because I don't have any experience like buying car, but for sure like my sister would have it, and I can speak behalf of them like what they experience. So
Well, guess what? After this training, please feel free to share this with your sister so that whenever she buys a car in the future, that she'll know what to do, because we're going to arm you with some different tools. How about you, Henry? Are you available to unmute yourself? Again, what's your name, your school, state, and what level member are you? And just, did you have any strange or interesting experiences buying or leasing a car?
Yeah, Henry Edwards, attend John Jay, second year Electus Society. And no, Tim, I passed. I don't have any experience.
Okay, no problem. I appreciate it. And then Susan, what about you? Susan, can you unmute yourself? Are you available to share any interesting experience buying or leasing a car? Horrible, strange experience?
No, and not at all. I mean, I've never had, the only time I bought a car was when I first got my first car, and that was from private person. And the only issue I had with it was that I didn't get it inspected before I bought it.
Yep.
Crashed the next day.
Oh, that's terrible. Yep.
Yeah.
No, and you know, you're not the only one. There's a lot of people
And the
hoping
car that I own now, my boyfriend bought it with his insurance money that he got for a workers' comp case.
Got it.
And there was no issues. Bing bang boom. He went in, knew the car he wanted, walked out with the car that day.
Wonderful. Now, I'd be curious to share this training with your boyfriend and see what.
He's not going to be driving anytime soon. He had a stroke last April.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, I'm sorry again. Sorry to hear that, Susan. But I hope that he heals.
So I own the car now.
Okay, absolutely.
He gave it to me for the insurance, could I insure it.
Understood. So in terms of the tip that you were talking about before about getting a car and then having an inspection, we're going to actually cover that exactly. And I'm going to share just my experiences. So let's jump right into the training. So again, I came from a poor family, right? So we didn't have very new or expensive cars. And my experience was cars were breaking down all the time. And my mother, she actually married a mechanic. So all the more reason, it was almost like, well, if anything's wrong with the car, we have a mechanic here to fix it. But it was just so frustrating to always know that, something could happen and that the car may not, function or work. So that affected me. So I'm like, I need to learn. I need to learn about how to take care of a car. I need to know how eventually, when I have money, how to buy a car. And so here were two books that I got: Auto Repair for Dummies and Buying a Car for Dummies. And I'll just share really quickly what I learned from Auto Repair for Dummies. There's a whole bunch of information, but something as simple as learning to actually change a tire on a car is something very important. I remember traveling across the country when I was doing traveling and speaking, and I parked in a parking garage. And then when I did my training and I came back to the car and I needed to get to the airport, guess what happened? I had a flat tire on one of the tires of the car. Now, I could have called the company. I could have had them fix it. It could have been half an hour to an hour, but I'm like, I'm running late for my trip. I was able to change the car. And just one little tip: you don't take off the bolts off the tire. Once you've raised the car up, you have to undo the bolts and unloosen them while the car is on the ground. So something so simple that I didn't know, but this is the things that you learn when you read different books about auto repair and things like that. So when it comes to buying a car for dummies, there was a lot of different principles that I got out of it. So I just wanted to share with you the main two, and then I'm going to share with you more a little bit later. The first principle, and this goes back to what you were talking about, Susan. Well, this is the first part. Know what the value of the car is, and so you can check the Kelly Blue Book, because sometimes people will sell you cars. Well, how much is it worth based on its make and model, based on its mileage, basically if it's in good condition, they can give you a ballpark. And then here, Susan, what you were mentioning about is when you're buying a used car, you don't pay and take the car. You say, hey, I'd like to purchase the car, but only on the condition that it's inspected by my own trustworthy mechanic before buying. And so you can make that arrangement. You can actually have them hold the deposit. They can actually go with you to the mechanic, whatever you want to arrange, but have that mechanic inspect that car. And you do not buy that car unless they've done that inspection. And hey, Will, now that I have you on the line, can I actually get your expertise? What are your thoughts about when you're buying used cars and they say that they're certified, like Toyota certified, that it's a good vehicle? Is that really legit? You know, could you still have car problems even after that?
So yeah, you definitely could have car problems after the certification. Certification is just a list that the mechanic will go through. So they have about 128 different points that to go through, which is inspecting hoses, brakes, and so on. And they have a certain amount of either tread depth for the tires or millimeters on the brakes that they can pass it. That means at a minimum, you should have about 5 millimeters on your brakes, which you could go down to 4 millimeters within, I want to say 10,000 miles, which is less than a year. Mm-hmm. Now you go into the dealership and you go, hey, listen, you know, do my oil change. They end up telling you that you need the brakes. And now it's like, why? I just got this car certified. Well, you were certified at the minimum due. So that's what most dealers do. I was, like you mentioned, I was a service director, or I still am a service director for a Ford dealership. I used to also do Toyota, Mazda, Subaru, and Jeep, Chrysler, Dodge at the same time. So they do cut corners because the sales department, they don't want to absorb that cost, which means the car would have been a lot more expensive for you to buy off the lot.
Wow. So what I'm gathering from everything that you're sharing is certified. It means it passed the most bare minimum test. So it's not, it shouldn't give you a relief like, oh, thank goodness I'm certified. I'm good. This car's perfect. It's just, it's drivable basically, right?
Exactly.
Oh, okay, cool. All right. So let's keep going. So I used these two principles to buy my first car. My first car was in 2001. I was in college. I needed a car to get around. So let's buy an old used car. It was a 1982 Chevrolet Cavalier. This one is a little tan. Mine was gray silver. And it was in a parking lot next to our auto mechanic shop. And we had our auto mechanic, who was really trustworthy, vouch for the vehicle. You know, he's like, I've inspected it. It looks good for the value. Perfect. So then we felt comfortable buying it for, it was for at least a couple $1,000s at the time, maybe 1,000 or 2,000. But it allowed me to drive safely for a couple years before it, you know, started to give me challenges, etc., and just regular maintenance. So now, as I graduated college, I needed to buy a car, right? My car was getting older. I was making money. So I'm like, let me review the book, Buying a Car for Dummies, and really let me get some insights into what I should need to know before I go to a dealership and buy a car. Now, here's something that I'm going to share with you. These are just some of the highlights that I learned from the book. But as you start to see and I start to describe them, I'm going to give some commentary because, again, even though this was the advice from the book that was from 10 years ago, things have changed, and Will has also given me new insights. So the first example that they said, or tip, is look poor. If you wear very expensive clothing, maybe the salespeople will quote you higher prices. And then, talking to Will, who knows people in the sales department, that is his experience. That's not necessarily the case. What it means is that hey, I don't care how you're dressed. You can dress, as whatever you want. What I need to know is what's your credit score? Do you have the money? They'll ask you a series of questions, because if you don't have the money, then you're just a person wasting their time, and they should focus on better customers. So I thought that was very interesting that Will
So to put more towards that subject, to look for, and like you said before, it doesn't really matter. When you're in the sales department, which I was in the sales department, I was a salesperson, also general sales manager. It doesn't matter what you look like. At the end of the day, we got to ask you 5 qualifying questions to see if you're either a tire kicker, which is somebody who's just shopping and has nothing else to do, waiting for your wife or waiting for your husband to get out of an office, and you're just spending time at a dealership, or if you're a serious buyer. So we would ask anybody, it doesn't matter what you wear, what you look like, hey, how's your credit score? And are you looking to buy it today? Or are you looking at, if I were to give you a great deal, would you buy it today? We will even throw numbers out there, lowball numbers that we can't commit to, which is, you'll get a Jeep Grand Cherokee that's normally going for, at the time, let's say $500 a month. We'll say, yeah, if I could get you this car at $300 a month, would you take it today? If you say no, that means you're not a serious buyer, and we would literally walk away from you.
Wow. So
look at how you look has nothing to do with anything else.
Yeah, filtering process, right? No, excellent. The next thing, thanks for sharing that, Will. The next thing that the book said, it's like, shop around. Tell them that you're shopping around. Don't make any commitments, because guess what? Maybe you can actually see where it could be cheaper, right? So this just means so much work on your part, and to not be very transparent with the dealer that, that you may be interested in actually buying a car that day. Another thing was hide your car, don't, park very far away from the dealership. Don't let them know what you drive, because maybe it could be an expensive car, and then they might charge you more. And so as I'm reading this, and as I actually shared this with Will, he's like, this is a very adversarial approach to buying car. Like, basically you're walking into the wolf's den, and they're going to attack you, and you have to survive. And so while that may have been the experience for some people and a different experience for others, to me, it just really shows that it's not whether you're right or you're wrong, but there has to be a new way of buying cars or leasing cars. And that's why what really motivated me to actually do this training and help all of you who are young professionals and older professionals that, just need a car and something that's reliable and not have to be taken advantage of. So I'll keep going. The other thing it says, hush, hush, don't share anything about a trade-in. Why did they say that? It's because they say, try to negotiate as low as you can, because then at the end, that's when you tell them that you have a trade-in, so that you can get the car even lower. And so again, it's more about negotiation, deception. Don't tell them what you can do. Talking with Will is like, I need to know if you have a trade-in so that we can reduce your car balance. But, again, this is what the tips that they were sharing. All right, part 2 of the other tips, don't be in a rush. Take your time. And one of the tactics that salespeople use is people make poor decisions when they're in a rush, right? So one of the tactics, and Will, I can see his nodding his head, they will wear you down, and they will have you get frustrated, wear out the clock. So you're just like, fine, just give me whatever you want. I'll sign the paper. So you're more likely to make, poor decisions. They said, don't share. Don't let them know what you really want. And again, going back to talking with Will, it's like, how are they supposed to help you if you don't actually know and tell them what you really want, right? So again, it's just wasting time. It's inefficient, and yet these are the tips that they're giving. This was a good idea. Shop at the end of the month or year, because dealerships need to make their sales quota. So if you are shopping towards the end of the month or towards the end of the year, when they have to get rid of their older models, they may be more likely to negotiate and say, yes, we need to get rid of this inventory because people want the newer versions. And so, hey, that's something that you could do. And then here, we're going to come back to this, is beware of the hidden charges. And I thought this was always very interesting, because it's like, once you sign those paperwork, they're going to potentially charge you a lot of fees. And the book said, like, for example, the advertising fee, do you as a customer have to pay for them to advertise their car? It says, no, you have no requirement in order to do that. And so I'm like, well, okay, good to know. I didn't know this. And so I'm going to talk to you in a little bit about my experience when I went to go buy a car. So it was exam time, right? I learned all these principles. It was time for me to actually go to a dealership. So I went to a local dealership here in my hometown near Port Washington and Roslyn. And I show up there and I start, shopping around, following all the parameters. Don't tell them what I really want. I knew it was a Toyota. Maybe I was going to get the lower model version, and I kept looking around. And so I'm like, okay, maybe I found a car that I want, a Toyota Corolla. What's the price? What can you give me? Blah, blah, blah. I wasn't ready to make a decision. So I got that price and got whatever was there. And then I'm like, okay, now let me go to another dealership. So I went to another Toyota dealership in Queens. And so I'm like, okay, I'm here. I'm shopping for a car. What can you give me? I have another dealership that's giving me this price. I want to see if you can beat it. And the funny thing about it is the salesperson did a tactic that I did not read about in the book. He handed me a piece of paper and it's like, okay, write down how much you were willing to pay and we'll see what we can do. And I'm like, wait a minute, I don't know what the actual price of the car, what am I actually supposed to pay? I thought you're supposed to tell me. And I'm like, oh my goodness. And so I almost froze for a second. And I'm like, wait a minute. I'm like, no. You just tell me, give me the best price, maybe only $1,000, $2,000 over what you're paying. I need a good deal, and then he gave me some numbers and I'm like, okay. So I left that dealership. Now it was time to go back to the other dealership. And so I go up to the salespeople and I said, okay, the salesperson that I first met with, I kind of like the guy. And I said, what are you going to give me? I already went to this other dealership. What can you do? And he's like, I'll work with you. I'll beat that price. And I'm like, oh, okay, good. All right. Now I feel like a little bit of a victory, right? I'm ready to, move forward. I'm getting a good deal. I followed the advice. And it's time to actually sign the paperwork and everything. And then suddenly I'm looking over the paperwork and what do you think I see? I see a term, advertising fee, $499. And I'm like, wait a minute, I'm not paying that. I'm not going to pay that advertising fee. And this is what they didn't teach you in the book. The salesperson basically says, no, that is a requirement, and just stayed silent. We can't sell you the car without paying that fee. And I'm like, wait, he's telling me straight to my face? I wasn't prepared for this. I thought he was going to say, you're right. No, straight to my face. No, it's required. And so I felt helpless. I'm like, I wasn't trained for this. So what I'd say, I'm like, okay, but what can you do for me? Can you hook me up? Is there anything else that you can do to help me save some money? Because I'm trying to keep these costs down. What can you do? And he basically says, listen, do you want a spoiler and make your car look? I can throw that in. I can see what I can do for that and without having to pay for that. And I'm like, okay, I'll take it. So again, it was kind of like a compromise. I didn't feel like, crap for not losing out on anything. But again, listen, I can get something out of it. So I walked out there, feeling shocked, but also felt quite comfortable that, hey, listen, I did my due diligence. I paid for the car. What else can I do? Right. So I was living my life, continuing everything, feeling very happy. And then I met William. So, William is a good friend of my wife. They actually went to high school together out here on Long Island. Again, I didn't really know a lot about what Will was doing. I know that he worked at a car dealership, but I didn't know anything what he was involved. He was really learning his skills, learning from his parents and everything like that. And so we connected later on. And he told me, hey, Tim, I started Marrero Auto Group. It's a leasing company. And I'm like, oh, you lease cars? I'm like, oh, I was always taught that you need to buy cars and things like that. And he's like, let me tell you all about the business. It is dirty. There's lack of transparency. I'm trying to, bring some new light to this industry. I want to be a car advocate for people. I want to educate people. And I'm like, right on. So teach me everything that you know. And he basically said that, listen, I have relationships with over 300 dealerships. And so I can actually tell you what's wrong with the car industry and how you can prevent yourself from being taken advantage. You know, if you or your family needs a lease, come to me. All right. I'm like, okay, good to know. Thanks so much. I really appreciate it. So at this time, I'm living in my home. My mother-in-law is living in our basement, and I let her do her own thing. She bought her own lease, went to the Nissan dealership and everything like that. And so in our conversation, she says, you know, hey, Tim, I need to get it. I need to renew my lease. And I'm like, wait a minute. This is what Will was talking about. We need to actually see whether Will can get us a better deal. So I talked to Will and I said, hey, Will, I just want to let you know my mother-in-law, she's in a current lease and everything, and it's time to renew. And he's like, okay, well, let me ask you some questions. He's like, how much is she paying in a monthly fee? What kind of car she have and everything? I'm like, she has a Nissan Rogue. She really likes it. And she's paying X a month, you know, for the car. And he's like, oh my God. He's like, she got taken advantage, I don't even know how to say it correctly. She got took advantage of, you know? And so he's like, she's paying way too much money for that vehicle. And I'm like, how did that happen? He's like, you know what? Knowing Elizabeth, she's not a very a disagreeable person. You know, she's very nice. She's very sweet. So like a lot of you, you know, who don't really know the car industry, you just show up to the dealership and say, I need a car. Here's what I can afford. Can you help me? And they just tell you what you need to sign. You need to do this, you need to do that. And so you say, yes, yes, and yes. And so you end up paying thousands upon thousands of dollars more than you should be paying. And of course, Will tells me all this inside tips. And he's like, we consider your mother-in-law somebody called a lay down, right? We love those because in the end, you just get the person to say, yes, yes, yes. And we're going to make a lot of money off of them. And so I'm like, this is just not right. This is, you know, just a terrible experience, you know, and why do we have to do this, you know? And yes, Susan, I saw your comment, your ex-husband leased a car and it was awful and they charged him 3 times the Kelly Blue Book at the end of the lease. Again, yes, these are just the types of horrible experiences. So I wanted to share with you, you know, my experience with William. And so I'm like, okay, Will, what can we do, you know, about my mother-in-law? He's like, okay, why don't you go to the dealership? You know, I think she wants a Nissan Rogue. Just see for just for fun what the dealership is going to charge her. Because listen, Tim, I know, you know, I'll be very transparent with you. I'll tell you how much it costs. I'm like, okay, so tell me exactly what's going to happen. And Will said, this is what's going to happen. Your mother-in-law and you are going to go to the dealership, right? They'll greet you. They'll be very hello. They'll ask you, do you have a car or trade in? They may grab your keys. They may check how much mileage is. They may have your license and all this stuff. And guess what? They might actually hold on to it and not give it back to you. Why? It's called the hostage technique. You know, you can't leave that dealership because you don't even have the keys to go to your car and leave. They're in control. And I'm like, oh my gosh, these are psychological principles I had never even heard of. But again, this is what they train the salespeople to do because they know that if you leave the dealership, you're gone. The chances of you coming back and getting that car are very, very low. So they need to get you and get you now. So then they show you the car, they show you all the things, and then it's the sit down. Let's talk about your budget. Let's go over the numbers, what you can't afford, and they give you some numbers. And guess what they do? Oh, it's too high. I can't afford that. Let me see what I can do. They go back to the manager while you're waiting and waiting and waiting. And you're like, come on, I have to go. They want to wear you down. So they come back. Hey, listen, I talked with my manager. We were able to reduce it a little bit cost. Can you do this? You know, and again, it's this process over and over again until finally you just say yes. And so what ends up happening is that once you finally, you know, say yes, or maybe if it's no, you end up walking out of the store because you're so frustrated. And that's when the major blow comes in. The manager comes up to you and says, hey, we're going to give you $2,000 off right now. You know, will you take the car? You know, whatever it is to get you to say yes, that's the moment that they get you. And then finally, when you say yes, they sit you down into the finance department, and then that's where you, okay, sign all, you agreed, you said yes, and then they start telling you you have to pay this fee and this fee and this fee on top of this, and do you need an extended warranty, maybe even if you don't need it, that's what you have to pay for. And so you just get, if you don't know anything, you just get taken advantage of. Now, Will, go ahead, what were you going to share?
Basically is the what if tactic. So before you leave, the question would be, what if I could get you to pay X amount of money?
Mhm.
And the minute you say yes, you're back in. You get back in. Now you go into the finance department, which we call the box, right? And you go into the finance department, and all your numbers change. But you're so tired of being there. You've been there for 6 to 8 hours. You're just ready to go. You know what I mean? Plus, you're in love with the car because they have a tangible item in front of your face. So now you're in love with the car. You love the leather seats, the sunroof, the infotainment system. You love everything about the car. Now you're just like, you know what? I'm getting a car out of this. And you sign your life away at that point.
Exactly. So again, I went into the dealership, and everything Will told me that was going to happen was happening, right? Up until the point where I'm like, we need to get out of here. And again, I stayed very quiet for the whole time because I wanted to be kind of like an observer. I didn't want to lead the process. I was just kind of there to give her support, to just see how this process would work out. And what was so interesting is when I said, let's go, that's when I got up, and then again, someone stopped us. And then again, my mother-in-law, she has a very hard time saying no. And you know, this whole emotion of feeling bad, you know, anybody who's done my Electus Society training, level 1, high performance communication, we know that there's 2 types of personalities, or extremes of one personality, called being disagreeable or agreeable. She's very agreeable, so she doesn't want that conflict. And so finally, after this was going back and forth, I finally interrupted and I said, hey, she doesn't feel comfortable buying the car at this time. Okay. You know, we can circle back at a future date. And that's when the manager's like, okay. And they kind of looked defeated, like, we lost this one. And so we walked out, and I'm going to tell you, we then went with Will, but I'm going to hold off on to tell the results of what happened with Will compared to what the dealership would say and what Will provided to us. I'm going to save that for the end of the presentation. So now I'm going to show you how the sausage is made. This is all the tips that I learned from Will that he can back up. And I said, Will, tell me everything. I need to actually help people. And he's like, are you sure, Tim? And I felt like once I started going into a deep dive, I felt like this guy, like I was going to be turned into sausage, you know, like there was so much information. And so this was actually a really hard training for me to put together because I'm not from the car industry, but I tried to break it down as simple as I could to really help you and help your loved ones. So here's my best shot at it. And Will at the end can tell me if I did a good job or not. So the first thing that Will taught me was, guess what? Dealerships will mislead you, and they're trying to entice the customers to get into the dealership, because once you get into the dealership, that's when they have the best chance of actually getting you. So again, anytime you see an advertisement, $469 a month for 36 months, only $4,000 due at signing. Well, guess what? Maybe they're offering some rebates or anything other these things. Well, guess what? You may not even qualify for those rebates. So that's why it's misleading. That monthly payment that you're seeing advertised, you're not going to pay that monthly payment. You're going to pay much more. And that money, that $3,999 down, well, guess what? It doesn't even include all these other kind of things that you need to pay for. So it's actually misleading in terms of what the actual fees are. What about all these other fees that you have to pay for? What about your taxes? What about your the title? All these different things, document fees, they're not included in that. So these are the things that you have to be very careful of. So that's tip number 1 from Will. Tip number 2 is whatever they have featured as this is the MSRP for this car, right? Well, guess what? That doesn't really exist. And I'm like, wait, what, Will? What do you mean? They're saying that this is what the car charges. He's like, no, this is what the bare bones of the car cost if you have no features whatsoever. And I have this image of Fred Flintstone. It's an old cartoon where it's like you buy this car, but there's nothing at the bottom and you have to run with your feet or something like that. He basically says that When you have a bare bones car, it has no features whatsoever. So that means, what if you want features? What if you want leather seats? What if you want a spoiler? What if you want, all these different things? Well, they're going to start adding up on the cost of the vehicle. And nobody really wants a car with nothing or no features. So when the car dealership buys the car, they've already bought it with many of all those features already included. So I give the analogy that, imagine you go and you want to buy a hot dog and they're like, hey, everybody, $2 hot dog. And then you show up to buy the hot dog and then you're like, do you want mustard, ketchup, or relish? That's 10 cents. That's 10 cents. That's 10 cents. It's like, oh my goodness, now this hot dog is not $2, it's $2.30. Oh, by the way, you need to pay taxes and fees. So now this is not a $2 hot dog. It's almost a $3 hot dog. So this is exactly what's going on in terms of the dealerships. So I went online. I'm like, okay, let's look at this Nissan Rogue. It says that it was worth $27,360, the MSRP. But guess what? When you continue shopping online, it says, oh, the moment you add leather, guess what? Now the car costs $33,000, $710. Or if you want it with this feature, it costs $35. Or this feature, it's, so it's like, oh my goodness, the cars are not really worth what they're originally advertised as for. And so this is Will's tip number 3. You need to know the 12 most common reasons of what determines the true cost of your car, because only when you have that true cost of your car can you actually be empowered enough to make some informed decisions. So there's stuff that's well known and there's stuff that's not well known. So here's what you know that's probably well known. Every car is different, right? So a make and model. So a Nissan Rogue might be different than a Hyundai Tucson, whatever it may be, right? What are the trims or features? That's just another code word for features, right? You could have exterior features, interior features, accessories. So heated seats, leather upholstery, infotainment system, all these different things could actually make up and increase the actual MSRP of the car. Then what year is it? Okay, then what mileage do you have? And you can almost assume that every car that you get when you're buying it, as a general rule, they say, you know what, people spend about or use about 10 to 12,000 miles per year on average per car. Okay, so that will kind of give you the idea of the true cost of the car, but that's not it. There's so many other factors. So here's what I did. So on the website, I started putting, what if I just put no features, right? Let me get that MSRP, and I'm not going to click on body. I'm not going to click on style, storage, lighting, miscellaneous. I'm just going to say 0 to all of them. Look at this. It says that the car now costs $28,585. That's interesting. I just asked it for no features. Why? Because there are other factors. I'm going to share with you what they are. Supply and demand is one other factor. If there's a chip shortage, your car could be much more expensive than the MSRP that the dealership could charge you. You could have rebates to the car, your credit score. So if the car needs to be financed, if you have lower credit, they're going to charge you a lot more. And then, like I said, the taxes and fees. There are taxes, titles, registration, inspection fees, all these other kind of things. And so as I started going through the website, it says, what's your credit score? And it wanted me to put my credit score. Do you have a down payment? Do you have a trade-in? All these other things could actually affect the cost. And so here's what ended up happening. It said, if I had no features, it would cost $28,585, of course, a little asterisk, because, that's not really the price. And they said, if you were going to finance the vehicle, right, you have to pay a monthly fee. Well, guess what? You're going to have to pay some interest. Let's say it's a 5.49 APR, annual percentage. For 60 months, you can pay $546. So then I'm like, okay, let me see the details. So it's $27,360. And then look at these additional costs right here, $1,225. And so I'm like, I want to know what those are. I click on a little box and I actually zoomed it up so that you can all see it. It says all prices listed herein are MSRP, which exclude installation, taxes, other costs, and are subject to change without prior notice. The dealer sets the actual price, and these are just pictures. Oh my goodness. So are you telling me that you've just added costs to this car and it's not even all of the different costs? And so again, this is what William was trying to actually educate me. It's like, you're not actually getting the true value of, or the true cost of the car. So here are the 4 other reasons on what is the true car of your cost, the true cost of your car. Now, the reason why I made them in red is because this is where I want all of you to be careful. This is where you can be easily taken advantage of or overcharged. And I'm going to go through each one of these and I'm going to explain to you how. So the first one is the payment method and terms. If you were to buy a car out right now and had all the cash, you don't have to actually, you're like, here's the money, here's the true cost of the car, let me buy it. But most people don't have $38,000, $35,000 lying around. So they have to actually finance it if they want to buy it and own it. So that means the bank, the dealership, the car manufacturer has to give you a loan. And so they will have different terms of how long you have to pay for it, depending on the years, et cetera, et cetera. So let me actually show you what that might look like. So on the website, they say, here are some general ideas of what you might pay based on the different terms. Are you going to buy or finance the car, right? So that means if you're going to buy it in 12 months, in 1 year, you're going to have to pay $2,136 a month, right? But if you actually pay it out over 72 months, right, much longer time, then maybe 6 years, then you actually have to pay $412 a month. You're like, oh, that might be much more affordable for me. Then look over here, a lease. A lease is a little bit different. It's a little bit cheaper. All right. And we're going to go into this. But as you can see, all these different terms could actually, you think, oh, right, this is the same price. And, you know, whether I do it now or later, it's all the same, right? No, Will taught me better than that. It's not the same. So I'm going to give you here an example. If you're financing a car, meaning I'm going to buy this car for 60 months, which is 5 years, you could say this is what the price is. But they can say, well, we can lower the monthly payment if you do 72 or 84 months. So here's some math for all of you. The car was $600 a month for 60 months. That was 5 years. That means it was $36,000. Now, if you say, well, what if we can actually reduce it by $590? Maybe that's more affordable. Now that's for 72 months. So that's going to be 6 years. Well, guess how much you're going to paying over 6 years? $42,480. That means that you thought you were saving $720. However, what you were really spending was $6,480 over 6 years just to save $10 a month. So I'm like, whoa, this was the mind-blowing thing. And this is where a lot of people, especially poor people who don't know about this, can be really taken advantage of. You know, now you might say, well, that's all I can afford and I have terrible credit. Well, I understand that's what you may have to do. But these are the things that I want to really educate you and Will wants to educate you about. So here's the next potential area to be overcharged, the deposit. So Will shared this with me, is when you think of a deposit, right, it's almost like you're putting a down payment, right? Here's this money that I'm giving you is going to help reduce the cost of the car. Well, guess what? Some dealerships can redefine the term, what deposit actually means. And that means, oh, we have limited cars, so you need to put on a deposit, but it's non-refundable. So that means if I put a deposit and then the car is not available, or I want to change another car, you mean you get to keep that money? Yes, that's what we mean. So again, these are very dangerous things that you need to be educated on, that you could be potentially overcharged. The next thing that you could be taken advantage of is the trade-in. Okay, you own a car. You either own it fully, it's all been paid off, or guess what? Maybe you've been making some payments, but you're tired of it and you want to get a new car. Well, how much is your car actually worth after it's brand new and you drove it off the vehicle? Well, it reduces in value, it depreciates. And Will, he actually gave me this rule. And Will, I saw you raise your hand. You want to chime in before I jump?
Let me chime in on the trade-in situation. With the trade-in, if you're financing a car for 5 years, let's just say, for the first 3 years, 80% of your payment is going towards your interest.
Wow.
So the last 2 years, maybe 3, depending on how long you have the loan for, that's when you're actually paying the vehicle itself. So if the vehicle was $28,000, Now you're in year number 3. You're trying to get out of it because you don't like the car anymore. You want to buy a new one. And now they tell you, well, you still owe $22,000. And you're like, but how? It's been 3 years I've been paying. Yes, you've been paying all of your interest up front, and toward the end of your loan, that's when you're paying the vehicle itself. So that's a lot. That's very confusing towards a lot of clients, and it hurts them at the end. And no one ever tells them that, you know, but it hurts them at the end because now you're going to be quote unquote upside down on your vehicle, and nobody eats that cost. It just goes on your next car and your next car and your next car, and you can never get rid of that bill unless you lease out a car, but you're never going to get rid of that bill.
Wow. And so to me, that's so shocking. So people think I'm going to be responsible. I'm going to own my car. I'm going to finance it, only to find out that I've been paying all this money. It's been going to mostly the bank. And then on top of that, you find out after 3 years, because you wanted to get a new car, right? Because you're maybe tired of it. Not only have you you owe all this more money, right, on the car is not even worth that much money, right? So it depreciates. So every car depreciates, meaning it reduces in value. But Will gave me this kind of formula. It's a general formula. It's not perfect science because every car can be different. But though this is how people in the car industry think about this, right? For simple math and simple numbers. The moment you drive it off the lot after the year 1, your car is going to be worth 25% less than what the MSRP was. Yeah. And then every year after that, it's 10% lower, and then another 10% lower. And so here's the problem with when you actually do trade-ins. You'll trade in your car, but the dealership is not obligated to tell you what your car is actually worth. And so you could look it up in Kelly's Blue Book, and you could do all these other kind of things to try to get a general idea. But guess what? You don't know how much value that car is. And they can end up saying, okay, we'll take your car. It's worth this much. But then they buy it, they own it, they can sell it, and then they can make a profit off of your car. So they're incentivized, you know, sometimes if they're not open and they're not transparent, to give you a low figure for your trade-in, because guess what? It's just another opportunity for them to make money. Will, do you want to chime into on that, or is there anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, so when it comes down to your trade-in, like you said, it's all determined by the dealership. However, at the end of the day, if you do your due diligence and you educate yourself on what your vehicle should be, you still have to have a range of what number you will accept for your car. So that's the only thing I would advise anyone who's looking into trading in their car, is just have some type of education on how much your car should be worth and what it is worth to you as well.
And so here's a value benefit for, you know, members of Electus Society. William actually does take in trade-ins, but because he believes in transparency, what he does, and he pays for a service to actually have access to auction houses, right, where he can see what people are buying on the auction market, which is the true cost and the true value of your car. Because you could think, well, Kelly Blue Book says my car is worth this. Well, he has in his system to see, well, guess what? Your car, your make, model, basically the years, this is what it's being auctioned for. So I really can't make a lot of money off your car. This is what it's really worth, right? So if you would like to do a trade-in and you want to say, Will, can you please help me out? Go to the website, Marrero Auto Group /trade-in, or just go to Marrero Auto Group, and where you click on the button that says trade-in, it'll fill out the information, and will actually give you a more accurate value of what your trade-in might be. And again, you don't have to use his website. You don't have to use him. There are other different resources, but at least he's saying get a general figure, okay, for what that's worth. And he'll go back to you within 24 or 48 hours. All right. So now, what's the last area of the true cost of your car? So I put car X, you know. So what is the real value of your car, the true cost? There are a lot of hidden costs that you may not know about with respect to your car. And so what are those hidden costs? Well, I'll tell you, some are legit and some are a little bit, you know, to beware of. Okay, let's just put it that way. So let me give you
all fees are in the gray area. Let's put it that way.
yeah. So let's talk about this, right? So if you're responsible for buying your car, it's really natural and it's expected of you to put some kind of deposit or some kind of down payment. Now, remember, the deposit should bring the cost of the car down, right? The next thing is they may say you need to pay your first month of your monthly payment in order for us, for you to drive the vehicle off. Understandable. You do have to pay a license fee. You do have to pay title and registration fee, a state inspection, taxes, insurance. Now, here's the thing. It's very common that dealerships will charge a documentation fee. Now, this is where Will kind of talks about hidden fees, because they have every right to charge you a documentation fee. They have every right to charge you whatever what they want. But the problem is that behind closed doors, when you're in the box or whatever it may be, right, as Will is saying, they can charge you a lot more for these fees than what should be normal or what should be expected. So it's very understandable, depending on where you're all throughout the country, to pay up to $1,200 for a documentation fee. But if you're paying $1,500, $2,000 and stuff like that, you could be, these are kind of hidden charges, right? They didn't need to charge you that, but they're charging you that because they're trying to squeeze you to get as much money as you can out of you. So it's understandable. So now, where do the hidden fees come from? It's when they start overpricing these other fees. So car dealerships could charge you a dealer fee. If you're buying a used car, it's a reconditioning fee, a prep fee. You have to get the car ready. An advertising fee, as you all know, I had that experience, right? Miscellaneous financing fees. Now, here's another way that they can kind of take advantage of you. If you're buying a new car, they might scare you and they might say, well, guess what? What if happens? What if you go over mileage? What if you need to actually, what if you decide to keep the car? Don't you want that protection and need that, a warranty? And Will, what was the language that they use now? They don't even use the word warranty. Can you share that with me?
They're called contracts. The
Yeah.
warranty is a scary word for consumers. They're called contracts.
So again, you're talking to somebody who knows the industry. He himself would not even use the word warranty, but that's what it is, right? Because guess what? You could end up being charged this warranty or this contract fee, and this will protect you, right? But you may not even need it, right? And so here's what's kind of spooky. Will is not here to demonize dealerships. He actually has, relationships with all these different dealerships all in the tri-state area. But what he's actually saying is, like, they should be able to make a profit. If they buy a car, provide a service, they should be able to make money. But the question is, how much money? And are they doing it in a transparent and equitable way? And the answer is, the current way that the industry is working, it's not doing that. It's not happening. So Will was telling me that basically, if you don't know, if you're a laydown customer, if you don't know, you could end up paying $10,000 or $15,000 more for a car than you should have been paying. And so that's what I'm really decided to do this training. I'm like, we have to really arm people in Electus Society and other people to help educate them so that they don't get taken advantage of. So let's kind of recap, because we've talked about a lot. Tip number one, dealerships may mislead you. They may entice you, but that's not what you're going to pay. The MSRP on the website, that's not what you're going to really pay either. You have to actually know what the true cost of the car is. And that's based on 12 factors. Okay. It's not just the make and model and mileage and year. It's all these other kind of things. And so you have to be aware of the 4 different costs of your car. And that's where you could be taken advantage of. Payment terms, the deposit, your trade-in, and all these other hidden fees that you didn't know you have to pay for, or they overcharged you on legitimate, understandable fees. Now, after all that, you're like, oh my goodness, Tim, I'm overwhelmed. What the hell? I'm not going to even buy a car anymore. What the heck am I supposed to do? I'm just going to go there and they're going to take advantage. Where can you get a car if you can't get it from a dealership? So now let's move towards a more positive end of this presentation, where it's like, let's empower you. What are the tips that you can actually do when you want to get a car, whether it's a new car or lease? So let's go through them. And this is what Will's recommendations would be. The first thing that you need to do is you need to figure out, well, choose a car. What kind of car do you want? Now, Will says, again, he's like, if I was talking to a family member and they say, and they ask me, Will, what car should I get? Will tells them the honest truth. He's like, avoid American cars, and again, that's very sorry to hear that, for people, I love America. I'm grateful for America, but he's like, if you want a reliable car, you're better off buying a Japanese and South Korean car. And I have to share you with this one small story. So those of you who know my background know that I used to work in government. So I worked for a council person who I won't mention his name, but here's a funny story. He needed a new car. And he's like, and I remember talking about them. I'm like, what are you going to get? I'm like, why don't you get a Toyota? Those are really good cars or whatever it is. He's like, no, I'm a politician. I'm an American politician. I don't think it's responsible for me to support and buy a foreign car. I'm going to buy an American car. I won't tell you what brand he bought. He bought the car. Guess what?
Or the Jeep.
No, it wasn't a Jeep. I promise you that. It started breaking down. Brand new car. The back door wouldn't open, right? And he had to go back to the dealership. They said, they're so sorry. Let's try to fix it. Let's give you a substitute car. They gave him another car. That car had problems. And again, this is an anecdote. This is not all cars, okay? But this was an anecdote. And I said, what happened? He's like, the second car they gave me, it's still problem. I'm so upset. I'm going to, because he was a lawyer, he's like, I'm going to go after them using the lemon law, because you're not allowed to sell people cars that are messed up. And so again, problem resolved. He eventually got his car and got a car that was working, but think of all the headaches, think of all the time that was consumed doing that. So I've listed some American cars, and again, it's not to disparage them. I mean, you could end up saying, hey, Tim, I have a Ford and it works fine. I'm happy with it. Go ahead. Great. Some of the American cars are cheaper than some of the Japanese or South Korean cars. So if that's all you can afford, then you do you. It's just, I'm just telling you what Will told me, as if he was what he would say to his own family member, right? And so, go ahead, Will.
Because I am still currently a service director, and like I said, I've been a service director for over 10 years. I'm only giving you of my experience with these cars. I've worked in both American and Japanese dealers, and for whatever reason, the American cars, it's either you got a great car and you never have to come to the service department, or I'll see you in 700 miles. So whatever you like.
Got it. Thanks, Will. I appreciate that. And what's so crazy is, like, Will is not going to argue with a customer. If somebody wants that car and really loves it, it's not his job to tell them, hey, you know what, there's a 5% chance that your car could have problems. People are fine with those odds. Again, I'm making up those numbers, but 95% of the time it will not have a problem. But you know what, maybe you could reduce that even further if you might go through, a Japanese or South Korean car. So again, these are some of the other cars: Kia, Mazda, Mitsubishi, Honda, Nissan, Toyota, Subaru, Hyundai, all this other kind of stuff. Okay. So now let's keep going. All right, now there are other types of cars, by the way, not just, American, South Korean, or Japanese. There are German cars, British cars, Italian cars, and now there's a lot of multinational cars. So sometimes they're not even American anymore, or it's a different brand. So there could be merging and things like that. But again, even with all of these luxury cars, they're going to be much more expensive, much more parts and labor. So again, stick with the Japanese or South Korean if you want that reliable car. Okay. So here's the thing that blew me away. If everybody sees Friends, this is Elaine, and whenever she was shocked, she would say, get out, and she would push somebody out. Because when Will told me, my advice to you and all the people is get a lease, don't buy a car, I was like, get out of here. I don't believe you. That's not what I was taught. This was what, you're supposed to save money. You do not get a lease. There's different factors for getting a car, getting a lease. And he's like, all right, let me tell you. And so I'm like, you know what? Fine. I'm going to go to Consumer Reports and I'm going to research what they say about getting a lease. And according to Consumer Reports, there are a lot of advantages of getting a lease versus buying or owning a car. And it kind of shocked me. And so I'm going to share with you what the article said. First of all, if you're like me and you want a trouble-free car, it's less likely to get a new car, whenever you get a lease, it's not going to break down, or it's less likely to break down. So again, if I have my wife is driving a car, even though we have AAA or pay for a warranty, a service thing, it just provides peace of mind that nothing is going to happen or less likely happen. The next thing, the manufacturer has a warranty. So if something were to happen, something happens to the car, it's covered, right? And whatever's not covered with that, if you get into an accident, insurance will cover. All right, good. You tend to get a nicer car, right? So, you might be much more enjoyable and things like that if you actually get a lease. The second part, which is when you get a new lease, technology is always advancing. So if you worry about, all the accidents that happen every year, most of the new cars have the latest safety features. So you're more likely to survive, less injury if you actually get a newer version of car. And then once you're done after those 3 years, right, a typical lease, guess what? You get to bring the car back, whether it's good condition, bad condition, it has residual value, right? So you give it back with little hassle because they know that that car could either be bought by the dealership and they can sell it or whatever it may be, right? They can use that car. It still has some, good life in it. And if you own a business or have a side hustle, well, guess what? Having a lease is part of your business expenses. And so when you're doing your taxes, you're like, look at all these expenses that I have. You can add that as an expense. So again, those are some advantages. So that's what Consumer Reports said. Now, let me tell you what Will told me that wasn't on Consumer Reports. Okay. So guess what? There's more. And if you've ever seen that movie, My Cousin Vinny, there's a scene where she's like, oh no, there's a lot more that I have to tell you. I highly recommend you watch that movie, My Cousin Vinny. So here's what Will told me. Most people get bored 3 to 4 years after they get a brand new car. That means they get tired of the car. So even if you're financing it for 5 years, most people are going to get that itch. I need to get a new car. I'm sick of this car, whatever it may be. And this is not just Will saying it. It's based on studies, right? The next thing is the depreciation rule, right? We talked about this before. On average, your car depreciates every year. The most within the first year, right? 25%. And then year 2, 10%. In year 3, 10%. So if you add what's 25 plus 10 plus 10, that's 45%. So that's why we use that kind of math that your car depreciates about 50%, 45 to 50% after the 3 years. Now, some cars are very different, but leases are for the first 3 years, right? Financing is 5 years or 60 months. So guess what? When you lease, you're paying for basically half that car and you got that value out of it, right, for what it was worth. So again, very interesting thing. Some people buy a lease get a lease, and then after their 3 years, they find out that their car hasn't really depreciated that much. It has so much more value, right? And so there's other different advantages for doing that, and we're going to be talking about that. And then the last thing, and this one I thought was really funny. Will's like, you know what? I just told you about American cars, are not that good, and Japanese cars and South Korean cars. Well, I'm sorry to break you, Tim, all cars suck now. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? He's like, man, they do not make cars like they used to, right? You may, if you're a little bit older, you may know that you've like, I have a Toyota. I had this car, it lasted me 20 years, no problems. Well, guess what? This is what Will told me. Car industry, they got smart. Why not make a much cheaper car, right? Guarantee it after 36 or 45,000 miles. But then guess what? After that, the car's going to break down. I use cheaper products, cheaper materials. And guess what? You as a customer, I can sell you again that new used car, and then I can get to sell you all these parts and labor. It's just basically a machine that says, give me your money. I need your money because this is what you need. And again, that may be a very cynical view, but listen, there is something called planned obsolescence, meaning they used to make a light bulb that used to last for 100 years. But they said, guess what? People are not going to buy light bulbs if we sell all the light bulbs in the last 100 years. So they invented a light bulb to die after a period of time so that they can always have more customers. So it's not far-fetched to believe that the same thing is happening with the car industry. So even though we said Japanese, South Korean, all cars suck now. So that means chances are after 45,000 miles, your car's going to start breaking down. You're going to need parts. You're going to have to pay for labor, and it's on you. Will, is there anything else you want me to add before I move on to that?
Yeah, it's not even about it literally breaking down. After 36,000 miles, now you're going into the heavy labor. So you're heavy maintenance. So now you're doing like coolant services, fuel injector services, throttle body services. By the time everything is said and done, you're spending an additional $1,500 to $2,500 in the service department on a yearly basis, trying to just maintain your vehicle. That's just preventative maintenance. That's not even if it actually breaks down. So you're always going to be paying for that used car. It's just, are you going to enjoy it after that?
Yeah. Got it. No, I appreciate that. And so here's the last thing. And, I was kind of resistant to getting a lease because I didn't like the psychological effect. I'm like, I don't really own the car. So what if I drive extra miles? What if I want to go to visit Canada and, family in Canada and things like that? And this, when you buy a lease, they say you can only drive 10,000 or 12,000 miles because we're going to charge you 15 cents a mile if you go over. And then this is what really sold me to actually get a lease. Well, he's like, do you know that you may not actually have to pay if you go over mileage? And I'm like, what? Tell me more, Will. And he's like, listen, when you return your lease to the dealership, it has a residual value, right? And so at that time, they check their system just like Will does, and they check the auction price and they say, whoa, this car's worth a lot of money. So if we were to give the car back to the bank, you would have to pay for all those miles that you went over, right? Because you know what? That was part of the contract. You lowered the value of the car. But if the dealership says, we can still make money off this car, what we can do is we'll buy out the car. We'll buy it off from the bank, and then we'll resell the car. And guess what? The dealership is obligated to pay if over mileage if they return to the bank. But if they're not returning the bank and they buy it, guess what? They own the car. So this is where I think it can be kind of sneaky with the dealerships, is they can say, oh, you went over mileage, you're going to have to pay X number of dollars. You're like, oh, really? Yep. So they get to collect that money, right? And they don't have to tell you. And then they can also sell they buy the lease and then they resell it. And so now they made the profit. So technically, if it was a good and honest dealership that was looking after your best interest, they would say, guess what? You don't have to pay those fees because your car has a lot of value and we're going to sell it and we'll eat the cost of those miles. We'll eat those miles. I've owned two lease cars. One was a Toyota Highlander that I got from Will. The second was a Toyota RAV4, and now I'm into a Nissan Rogue Sport. Both of these two cars that I had went over miles, and Will, because he's the inside in the car business, said, guess what, Tim, your cars have value. You don't have to pay overage of miles. I should have paid an extra $3,000. And so again, you get to choose whatever you want. And now that you're armed with this information, I hope that it's actually helpful. But that's why I feel comfortable a little bit more doing a lease and, again, working with Will and other trustworthy individuals or brokers. And we'll talk about that, who can actually help and look out for your best interest. Will, is there anything you want to add to that? Because I know that's kind of complicated.
Well, like you say in the bottom, the dealerships don't have to disclose that they're buying the vehicle. So it's going to be hard for a consumer to sit there and be like, well, you're going to buy up my car. Why are you charging me? That's the transparency that I'm talking about, because a dealership, they don't have to tell you, but they should. You know what I mean? You are their client. You're the one that always goes to that person. They should be able to tell you, you're not going to have to pay over. What they normally do, their practice is, I'm going to charge them their over mileage, and then I'm going to buy it. So that's complete profit. So let's just say, Tim, you would have traded into a dealership. Those $3,000 that I saved you, you would have been paying them, and that would have been pure profit for them.
Wow. Now, Will, Susan asked a great question. What if you're at the end of your lease and you're like, you know what? I don't want to get a new lease or whatever. I don't want to put another deposit down. I just want to buy out my lease. I know I went over miles, but let me just buy it out myself. What happens?
So when you get your payoff, when you're going into your account, so let's just say you have Jeep Financial, for instance, it's not a real company, but Jeep Financial, they'll give you a payoff on your vehicle. So they'll say, okay, your vehicle is worth $20,000 right now if you want to buy it out. However, they give the chance to the dealership by telling you have to go through a dealership in order for you to buy your vehicle out. Now, the dealership will turn around. The way they make their money is, yes, you're obligated to buy your vehicle at 20 grand, nothing more. However, we have to certify your vehicle, which is not true. That is not true at all. You don't have to get the vehicle certified. But they say you have to get the vehicle certified, which is going to cost you another $3,500. You have to get extended warranty, which is also not true. You don't have to get warranty, which is another $3,500. They charge you finance charges because they're going to go through their banks. So they charge you finance charges of another $5,000 to $7,000. So you see where I'm getting at? That's already $14,000 above what you were going to pay for your vehicle originally. So that's why I never advise people to buy their own leases out, because there's a chance if you were to not buy it cash and you're going to finance it, there's a chance you're going to be spending $7,000 to $10,000 on the low side on buying your own vehicle back. Not only you're doing that, within 2 more years, when you think that this is all over and you're like, oh, okay, the prices went back down to normal, now you still owe money on this car and you're trying to trade it in. So you're like triple paying for a vehicle at this point. It's, that's the fact of the matter.
Got it. Well, I know to me, when I hear all that, Will, I get discouraged, right? It's like, man, there's so much inside stuff. There's so much things that people are getting overcharged, and it gets me kind of upset and frustrated. And I think this is why I felt really comfortable bringing Will on this training, because I feel as an obligation to educate people about, Electus Society is all about integrity and transparency. And this is just not right. And it's just very frustrating. So I really appreciate you, Will, sharing all this insight. And so don't be discouraged like I am feeling right now after hearing all that. There are other tips. Okay. So, let's keep going with, Will's tips and suggestions. So 1, right. Choose your car. Number 2, he recommends that you get a lease and you don't buy the car because of all the different challenges and all the different benefits of leasing, right? So now Will's next tip, right, is know the simple math, okay, to avoid overpaying. So now I'm going to go through some formulas, okay? Now, I tried to simplify these as much as possible, and you'll forgive me because it's a little bit of a math section and I don't want to bore you all to death, but I wanted to give you 3 examples. 1, if you're financing a car, okay, or buying it outright, what's that true cost? If you had all that money. 2, what if you were financing the car, right? What if you're financing the car and putting a deposit, and then that's like 2A, right? And then 3, what would happen if you actually lease the car? So knowing these, what the true value of the car, and using these simple formulas, these will give you base numbers to say, how much are you charging me? Whoa, that's way too much, and it will kind of guide you to help you, to prevent you from overpaying. So let's go with the first example. So to know what the true value, or not the true value, excuse me, the true cost of the car, know the true cost formula. You need to get the real MSRP, not what the website is saying, but once you add in all those features and put them together, because guess what? It's going to be $5,000 to $10,000 more than what it says on the website, right? From the original advertisement. You'll get a good idea if you go on the website and add all those features, but at least that's the real MSRP.
So the real MSRP, the real MSRP will be at your window sticker. So whatever the window sticker is, that's your real MSRP.
Got it. Okay, perfect. Yeah, so that if you go to a dealership and you look in the car, it'll say the MSRP. It will say, oh, this Nissan Rogue is worth, $35,000 because it has leather seats, heated seats, whatever it might be, safety features, infotainment system, right, Will? Yeah, I remember, Will telling me stories. Someone say, I got a Nissan Rogue for this much and I only paid 500. And like, I got a Nissan Rogue and I paid 600. Oh my goodness, did I overpay? It's like, no, you have to figure out what the real MSRP of that vehicle was in order to determine that, right? So once you get that number, you have to understand you have to pay taxes and the legitimate fees, not the overcharged fees, reasonable fees. So using this example, I use the Nissan Rogue. It's not $27,000. If it has all the features I want, maybe it's about 35,000. Add the taxes. So I use New York State as that example. So New York State charges an 8.875% tax. So do the math. You could either multiply 0.008 by 35,000 and you get 3,106, or you just put 1 plus 0.0875, you times that by 35,000 and you will get this number. It is 38,106. So that is the MSRP plus taxes. But then guess what you need? You need to add the fees in there. Now, how much could those fees be? Will basically says fees should be around $1,500. Now, could the fees be $2,000? Yes, that's reasonable. Listen, a dealership needs to make money. It's not, whatever it may be, but at least now you have a general ballpark of what the cost of the vehicle is. But that's the true cost. Now, I put a little asterisk. Why? Because I just got done training you that there's 12 reasons or 12 different factors that will determine the cost. So you could say whatever you want. Hey, I went to this training with Electus Society. This Nissan Rogue should be worth $39,600 with all the tax and fees. They're like, yeah, but the demand for Nissan Rogue is really high right now. So we're selling it 5,000 more than MSRP. You're like, oh my goodness, but this is the general rules that I want you to go by. So that's the true cost of the vehicle. If you had all the cash right now, boom, you put 39,606 as a reasonable, or around 40K, you got a good deal on that Nissan Rogue. Now, what if you need to finance the vehicle? What's the formula? What should you know? You take the true cost, the MSRP plus the taxes plus the fees. And remember, taxes will be different in different states. So I use New York as that example, but it could be New Jersey, it could be Connecticut, your state could be Florida. It might be much cheaper. So again, you have to do that on your own. If you're financing the vehicle, most financing is done over 60 months or 5 years. So assume you got the best deal, 0 deposit. I didn't have to put a deposit down, 0 APR. Oh my goodness, you lucked out. You just divide the true cost divided by 60. So now I should be paying about $660 per month for 5 years. Okay, that's how much the car costs of the Nissan Rogue. If all other factors, 0 deposit, now 0 APR. Now remember, we can change those factors. So that will give you a ballpark. What if you had to put a deposit down? Well, I give you an example here. Let's do it. Formula 2A, formula for financing with the deposit. You put this money down, assume it's non-refundable, and it's actually going towards the cost of the vehicle. You take your true cost, you minus the deposit, okay? It was $39,606. I put $3,000 in deposit. The car should be cheaper. It should be $36,000 now. Now you divide it by 60 months. This is how much you should pay. $3,000 deposit will be $610 per month for 5 years. Now notice how it went down from 660 to now 610, right? Because you put all that deposit down. And again, I always put an asterisk is because it could be all those other factors. Now, what if you want to lease? Okay, I had to confess, Will actually showed me the formula to calculate a lease. And I said, Will, I can't teach the students that. It's way too complicated. You have to do with the residual value percentage of the vehicle. The taxes are based on the full vehicle, not on, and I'm like, just give me something. What can I give to the students to say, hey, let's help you understand how much you should reasonably pay for a lease? And he's like, okay, take the true cost, right? MSRP, taxes, and fees. Now you have to understand you're going to be paying for about half of the car, right? For the first 3 years, the 50% depreciation as we used as a general rule. So divide the cost of the car by 2, okay? Now that you have that number, in this case, 39,606 times 0.5 or divided by 2, you get 19,803. Now you have to divide that by 36 months because you're going to have to pay that on a monthly basis. So what's 19,803 divided by 36 is 550 for 36 months. Now, that's not a true number because there's so many other factors that go into a lease, right? You know, you may have to also put a deposit down. You may have to do all these other things. So he says, you know what? Try to give a general rule plus or minus $30. So what would be 550 plus $30? Well, it would be $590 for 36 months. So now that I know how much a lease should cost, take the true cost, divided by 2, divided by 36, add maybe $30. Now I have a ballpark. So every time I'm shopping around, let's just say you don't have Will, you could at least say, I should be paying around $600 for this lease of this car, right? At least now I know what I'm dealing with. So I think this is very important information to have and to help you. So now, remember, I promised you the end of the story of how I went to that dealership with my mother-in-law, and I wanted to share with you how much they were charging me and how much Will was charging me for getting the lease. And here's the actual math. And again, she bought the car like 2 years ago, so I had to update it with like current numbers so it'd be more realistic. So the dealership wanted her to pay $701 a month, and they needed a $3,000 deposit, right? And then I said, okay, no, thank you. Guess what Marrero charged me? $539 per month, and it was a $3,000 deposit. So if my mother-in-law would have gone to the dealership, she would have had to pay $162 per month for that car. And guess how much he saved her over 3 years? $5,400, you know? So to me, you know, that's why I think I felt really comfortable bringing Will on. I'd like to be able to share him with all of you. And again, some of you might be curious, well, doesn't, you know, Will, you know, he still has a leasing company. Doesn't he still have to make a profit? You know, how do I know? Should I shop around from him to other people? Well, I wanted to educate you too, because, you know, Will has a philosophy of transparency and right and integrity. So he wanted me to educate you how leasing companies or different companies who you buy cars from, and explaining to you about what brokers are. So a car broker is somebody who specializes in buying and servicing different vehicles for customers. So it means that, hey, you want a car? You don't have to go to the dealership. I'll get you your car. I'll get you your brand new car. You can buy it. You can lease it. It's almost like a middleman, so you can actually avoid having to go all to the dealerships, right? And so that's what Will is. But just because he's a car broker, he's actually doesn't mean that all car brokers are good. Just like you can go to a doctor and you're like, are all doctors good? No, you can have good doctors and bad doctors. It's just how trustworthy those individuals are. Will is trying to actually break the mold of brokers. And what he's kind of rebranded himself and all of his company as car advocates. Again, that's not a term that's widely accepted or used, but he actually is using it to differentiate itself. A car broker can, you know, offer whatever you want and have to pay all this money, but a car advocate, you know, is somebody who actually provides you transparency, doesn't actually try to hide the fees, you know, educates you. So for example, you're like, so how does Will make money? Well, brokers will have relationships with dealership and say, okay, the MSRP is 35,000. Okay. But guess what? Because you're a broker, I can give you the car for $33,000. You don't have to, why would the dealership do that? They're going to make some profit, whatever that might be. But guess what? They don't have to pay their staff. They don't have to pay their finance guy. You know, they don't have to do all these things. They're just like, hey, I just made my inventory. I'm getting rid of it. This is a great thing. And so the broker is getting this car for like $33,000. And then they're going to come to you and then they're going to say, what can you charge for your monthly payment? What can you put a deposit? And guess what? They reserve the right to charge you an additional $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 on top of the MSRP. Because guess what? They're a business. They need to make money. They're offering you a service. So you know what? more power to them. If you have the money to pay, go ahead. That's their profit. But Will basically said, I don't think that's really fair. I think that people should make a profit, but they shouldn't gouge customers. And so one of the ways that he does that is when they actually sell that car, many times the dealership would say, hey, William, hey, broker, thank you for selling that car out of my dealership. Here's $1,000, as a thank you for selling that car, because they saved them money. They got it off their inventory. And so guess what? Now Will is able to charge $33,000 and all the taxes and fees to the customer to show them the true cost. And guess what? Instead of being ripped off for $5,000, $10,000, he made $1,000 off of this car through using him as an honest and trustworthy car advocate or trustworthy car broker. So again, I wanted to provide that transparency for all of you in case you really want it, and just remember, yes, thanks, Will, making that example. Taxes may be different if you're from different locations, whether it's New York City or New York State, right? Will?
So yes, so like you mentioned as well, $1,000. Now everybody will question like, okay, why would you only make 1,000? Another broker make 3,000 if you can make the 3,000 yourself? It's retention, customer retention. If I were to lease you a vehicle and I only made $1,000 off of the dealership, and you like my services, you will come back. You will refer me to your family, your friends, your sister, your mother. So I'd rather make $1,000 from the dealership 5 times than to make $3,000 and never see you again.
Yeah.
So that's the reason why we do it.
No, I appreciate that. And Susan, you're asking great questions. And so I'm just going to end with this. Now's the time to ask any questions that you have. Will is available to all Electus Society members. He can actually get you a new car, lease car. He says, avoid used cars. Don't do it. It's too much headache, right? He can serve New York, New Jersey, Connecticut. He could technically serve other states, but the problem is Will would have to transport the car, and that would be additional cost. And it's like, you're better off being educated with all of his knowledge that he has and use it to negotiate in your state the best deal that you can. And he says, he will make himself available to the Electus community and the family members of the Electus Society community. All you need to do is you can actually book a meeting directly on his calendar. It's calendly.com. Marrero has 2 R's, Marrero, auto, and you can book a free 15-minute consultation. There's his phone number. Everybody who's watching this and watch this recording should write it down. He's a very busy guy, so he could get back to you within 24 or 48 hours. But if you mention that you're an Electus Society member, he can make sure that he can find the biggest cost savings for you. And as a thank you to me, he says, hey, you know what? Many times I give referral fees. Any of your members who end up buying or leasing a car, Tim, I'll donate the referral fee that I usually give to other customers to Electus Society. So I said, thank you, Will. I appreciate it. That helps me with the trainings and time and everything like that that goes into it. So again, I wanted to be fully transparent so that, again, because that's what we were talking about, the value. So I really appreciate everybody and all the time. So now any questions at 7 o'clock, let's just answer Susan's question. Is there a difference in availability of car advocates depending on the area or brokers in the area?
Well, because I'm a small business, I have 5 advocates that I work with. Usually I'm the one who shows up to every single one of the deliveries. So I'm the one who's available. So even if I have to go to Maryland, which I've done it, Virginia, Boston, I've actually driven the vehicles myself to customers' houses and made sure everything was explained to them. So we are available at all times.
Nice, Susan. That was funny. Does anybody have any other questions? Henry, Kieran, anything else you guys want to ask Will?
No, I think you covered pretty much a lot of grounds on that one, Tim and Will. Yeah, and I appreciate the number in the email that you'll put up in the chat. So I'll reach out. I definitely will reach out to Will. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Henry.
The number I put on the chat, that's my personal cell phone number. You call me anytime. Also, you could text the 347-454-5115 number. That will go to any of our advocates, even myself. Usually I look over all of them. But again, if anybody has any other questions, even service, and you don't even have to be one of our clients to ask any questions, we will definitely help you out.
No, thanks so much, Will. Kieran, do you have any other final questions for Will or any final comments based on the training? Kieran, are you there? You may be on mute. You might be busy. It's all right. Well, Will, I just wanted to say thank you so much. I feel like I'm educated on this. If you didn't actually share this insights with me and provide me the transparency education, I wasn't able to give this to all this Electus Society members. So I hope everybody is better off, you know, that they can use Will as a resource. Again, you don't even have to buy a car from him. Just use his phone number. If you're struggling in a different state, he can help guide you. And, you know, we appreciate everybody and all the people who are watching this recording. Kieran, I see your note. There's a lot of content covered, so I need time to process it. Yes, I packed this presentation. It's going to be in the recording. You can rewatch
and that's without the formula.
You can pause it on the formulas. You can write it down, you know, but at least now you have some tools available to you to not get taken advantage of and to protect your family and yourself. So yes, thank you, Kieran. All right, everybody have a great night. To see you tomorrow's training. We have another one, and for those who can make it, we appreciate it. All right, have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.
Good night.